A mark of a good book is the fact that it can draw you into the story and draw you into the main characters in the story. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I love Anne of Green Gables, the movie. I also love Anne of Green Gables, the book. And the reason I love it so much is because every time I read the book or I listen to the audio version of it, I'm drawn into the character of Anne. And I find myself thinking like Anne and kind of acting like Anne after I've read it or after I've listened to it. In the step of interpretation, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to step into the shoes of the author and the original reader. And we want to understand their world and their concerns so that we can understand why they wrote the things they did and how it affected them and how it communicated to them. So in order to do this, there's three things we want to do. We want to look at the historical background, we want to consider the literary context, and we want to begin asking questions. So to understand the historical background, this is where we're exploring the story behind the letter or the story behind the book. This is where we want to look for clues in the text itself so that we can understand maybe the issues that were going on, or who the author is, who the readers are. We want to look for those clues in the text itself so that we can understand the situation that was going on before the people received this letter or this book or this writing. The other thing we can do when we're exploring historical background is consult external sources. So we first of all look at internal sources. That's the clues that we can find in the text itself. And then external sources are things like Bible dictionaries, commentaries, these external resources, even other ancient documents that give us or help us understand the original context a little bit better. When we're thinking about original context, we want to think about culture, geography, we're crossing time, we're crossing cultures, we're crossing languages, and so we want to explore these things so that we can have a better understanding of that historical context and we can step into the shoes and the minds of the author and the original reader and original hearer. The second thing we want to do is we want to explore the literary context. And there's three ways we can do that. First of all, we want to establish or understand the genre or the type of literature that we're looking at. There's various types of literature in the Bible. They're not all the same, and they're ancient types of literature, so they're different from what we're familiar with. An ancient letter is similar but looks different than a letter that we write today. And so we want to know those features of a letter. We want to understand narrative and the features that make up narrative. Or Hebrew poetry. Hebrew poetry is very different from our poetry and how we understand it. And so what did the Hebrews do in their poetics to communicate ideas and communicate that emotion that goes with poetry? We need to understand the genre. And so these are things that we can explore to understand the literary context of what we're reading. We also want to think about the structure of how the author put his ideas together, how he communicated the things that he communicated. And we explore this as we look at the structure of a book. How did he outline his ideas? Authors put a lot of thought into what they wrote. It wasn't just thrown together. It was thought out and written down. And so we can explore that and find structure in these documents that we're reading. The third thing we can do is also understand the context, the literary context within the story of the Bible. Is it early in the story of the Bible, or is it in the middle or at the end? Is it part of the Old Testament or the New Testament? Is it talking about Jesus and what he did on earth, or is it in the time of the church? The better we understand that overall story of the Bible and the place of a particular book in that story, the better we will understand what's being communicated and why. The third thing that we want to do in order to step into the shoes of the author and the original reader is to begin asking specific questions. So in the step of observation, we looked at specific details in the text. Now we want to look at those details again, and we want to ask the question, Why did the author write this? Why did he write it this way? What effect did that have on the original reader? We want to consider what's written in light of the author and the original reader. So you want to ask two questions in particular. Why did the author write this? And what was the significance to the original reader? If you answer those two questions, you'll have a better understanding of, you'll be stepping into the shoes of the author and the original reader, and you'll have a better understanding of the text and what was written and why. And that's a step of interpretation. So my challenge for you is to once again open up your Bible, turn to Philemon, and this time read through the text, looking for those clues that will tell you what was going on before this letter was written. Who was writing this letter? Who is it written to? And what's the relationship between these two people? Explore that backstory, that story behind the letter. And once you find those clues, write a short description of what was going on. Tell us the story of the letter to Philemon. Once you've done that, if you want to explore and get into some of those details, take note of those things that you noticed in the step of observation and start thinking about, why did Paul write this? And what did it mean to Philemon, to Onesimus, and to the church in their house? Happy studying.